one of my kind of, pulpit moments is, sleep is as important to our health and our well-being as what we put in our bodies, what we eat, and how much water we drink, right? So it's a fundamental need. And if we don't get it, we will die. So we have to think about kind of centering sleep back into the mainstay of our health and well-being, and not being the first thing that we kind of push off or move to the back burner when we want to be productive.
You're listening to Becoming Wildly Resilient, brought to you by University of Kentucky Human Resources, Health and Wellness. In this series, we'll explore a variety of well-being topics with experts from the university community in physical, emotional, nutritional, and financial health. Join us, and together we'll discover how we can thrive at work, home, and beyond. Welcome to another episode of Becoming Wildly Resilient. I'm your host, Jakob Hester, and today I'm joined by Dr. Lauren Whitehurst. She is an assistant professor with the College of Arts and Sciences Psychology Department. In this episode, we'll be talking about another aspect of our well-being that affects each of us every day, sleep. Thanks for joining me on the show, Lauren.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So to start, just tell the listeners a little bit about yourself as a person and the work that you do.
Yeah, so I am an assistant professor in the Department of Psychology, as you mentioned, and I run a sleep lab here at the University of Kentucky. So my lab is out here in the Coldstream campus, and some of my main questions that I ask are, how does sleep help us think, learn, and remember better? How does it impact our cognitive function? And I also ask, what happens when we don't get good sleep? Both immediately, kind of how our cognitive functions change, how do our emotions respond when we don't get enough sleep? If we do get good sleep, how does that really support and uplift those same systems? And then I also look at that across the lifespan, and I ask, well, what if we chronically are not getting enough sleep? What does that mean for our bodies and our brains and our health and our cognitive function as we age and as we get older? So those are some of the questions that I ask in my lab, and how we can really figure out what mechanisms of sleep matter to those things. And can we alter or increase or enhance those to really make us resilient, or make our sleep resilient, make our sleep really work for us well.
That's excellent. That aligns really well with what we talk about on the show. So I think you'll be a really great guest, and I'm really excited to dive into a lot of those concepts because I've got a lot of questions about sleep. So what about you as a person?
So I am originally from the Southeast, and I am generally kind of curious. I've always liked to read a lot. And so science was kind of just like a natural calling for me. You get to like ask all these different questions and then figure out ways to answer them. And so I've always kind of just fell into science as one of those things that I just did naturally. And then I figured out that you could study it and get a degree in it. And so that's kind of how I ended up where I've been, where I am now here at the University of Kentucky. But prior to that, I was living out in California doing my graduate work. And so I was in California for about 7 years, doing my doctoral work and doing some other kind of postdoctoral work before getting a job here at the University of Kentucky in August of 2020. So I moved right in the middle of the pandemic.
Oh, wow. How has that transition been for you so far? I guess you're probably excited to see things open up a little bit more and really get to experience campus, I would imagine.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like it's, I've been telling people it's like year 1.2 for me. Like I did a full year last year, but it was all remote and everything was shut down. And I didn't really get to know Lexington, let alone campus life. So I'm really excited for, things opening up and us, people starting to see each other a little bit more, teaching in person, seeing students, that all those things really make me excited. Hopefully everything can roll out as we expect it to in the next couple of months.
And I imagine making that transition during that time as well was probably relatively stressful. So besides something related to sleep, what is one self-care strategy that you use to recharge?
Oh, such a good question. So let's see. Well, sleep is definitely one of them. So except sleep is a big exception for me. But I love spending time outdoors. So I've actually been really the pandemic and COVID and like indoor spaces being limited or access to them being limited, I've really just been outdoors a lot and I love that. So I've been kind of doing some of the walking trails around town. I have a little puppy that I love. He's 18 months. And so I spend a lot of time with him and then take him outside and do these walking trails and stuff in the city and nearby the city, which is really great.
Awesome. Well, let's jump into sleep. Let's talk about that because obviously it's a passion of yours. It's a personal passion of mine. I don't know as much about it, but I do really enjoy it. So I'm looking forward to talking about it. So I think kind of the most broad question I'll probably ask in this entire interview is, how much sleep do we really need?
Yeah, that is a question I get often. And I think my answer is always so frustrating to people because the truth is that how much sleep we need varies so much across our lifespan. So when we're young, as many people know, if you've ever, been a parent and you had an infant, you know that your young infants need a ton of sleep. They sleep a lot. And then as children age, they need a little bit less. And then sometimes they have developmental changes that require a little bit more sleep. And then as we get into our adulthood, our sleep needs kind of settle anywhere between 7 to 9 hours. And then once we age and get into kind of older adulthood, our sleep needs kind of maybe around 6 to 8 or 9 hours as we start to age, age plus 50, plus 60. Then we start needing kind of typically a little bit less, but not I would say not fundamentally different. Once we hit adulthood, we kind of need anywhere between 6 to 9 hours. I say it varies, and I'm giving that broad range of 6 to 9 because each person actually has an individual sleep need. And so to know what your sleep need is, what I usually suggest is sleep when you get tired at night and wake up when you feel rested in the morning, and do that for a couple of days. And the average of that is likely what you need. So there isn't this kind of stamp. I think everybody's always heard 8 hours of sleep at night or 7 hours of sleep at night. And that really does vary. And I caution from those kind of one size fit all sleep recommendations, because if you don't need 8 hours, let's say you're typically more of a 7-hour sleeper, then you might feel frustrated with trying to get 8 hours. You might feel like, oh, I'm not getting enough sleep, but for your body, you are. And let's say you actually are a 9-hour sleeper. That's kind of like me. I'm more of a 9-hour sleeper at night. And if you're a 9-hour sleeper at night, you might say like, oh man, I don't feel rested even when I'm getting 8 hours. And that's because your body might need a little bit more. And so trying to figure out kind of what your sleep need is, it really comes down to you spending some time with yourself and figuring out how much you need.
Yeah, I think those are really great points because I've kind of found that through trial and error as well, and like how much sleep I need. I think I'm on that sort of 9 end of the spectrum as well. That's at least my sort of preference range, at least is they hit around 9, but I can function generally pretty well on like 7.5. And if I'm in a pinch every once in a while, maybe like a 6 hours or something like that. But I found that some of the like in between times, like if I did shoot for exactly 8 or something like that, I'd wake up sometimes maybe even like probably in the middle of a cycle or something like that. And I feel a little more groggy than I would as if I'd gotten up maybe a half hour earlier, maybe an hour later or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an interesting concept of like, we see it as this like 6 to 8 hour range. And I think that can get confusing for people. And it may, like you said, lead to being like frustrated if you're trying to hit some sort of arbitrary-ish level that you think you should be at, but your body may need something else, and how that actually changes over time as well. So you covered a lot of really great points there just in one single question. But how many people kind of, I guess, adults, I would say, how many adults actually get the amount of rest that they need regularly?
It's a little bit depressing. I feel like part of the nature of the American society is go, 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 go. And so I think we a lot of times put our sleep on the back burner. So a recent poll from the National Sleep Foundation, I think it came out in 2020, just last year, suggested about 72% of people are reporting that they are sleepy or that they have high levels of sleepiness at least 2 or more times per week.
Wow.
Which that's like, man, so many of us are walking around so sleepy, and we're not doing, I think, the right things to catch up with that sleep or trying to make up some of that sleep loss. So I think, not enough of us is the answer to that question. Not enough of us get enough sleep or rest regularly.
Yeah, it's something else that I've read about recently too that I think is kind of interesting is work around chronotypes. So can you talk about that a little bit and then how that may impact your sleep too?
Yeah, definitely. Chronotypes are so interesting. I think I think one of the things I was talking a little bit earlier about kind of how you get frustrated if you think you need 8 hours, or that's what you've been told and you're trying to get that 8 hours, it might get frustrating if your body actually only needs 7 and you're like, man, what am I doing this in bed for an extra hour? Like, I don't know what to do. Chronotypes is a really good example of that as well. So some people are what we call evening types. And evening types basically means that their cognition and their wake drive stays up a little bit later into the night. And so you kind of think about those people as like night owls. They can work late, they don't seem tired, they go to bed a little bit later, they wake up a little bit later, and they're completely functional. But if their jobs or their kind of daily activities interfere with them sleeping a little bit longer, they might appear much more sleepy throughout the day, but that's because their natural chronotype interferes with the kind of external demands that they have on their body. So that will be an evening type, and kind of what can go wrong with being an evening type. On the other side is what we call our morning types. And our morning types are people who are like, they wake up early in the morning, they're 5 a.m.ers, and they are ready to go, ripping and roaring. And they, are really kind of think about these people who are like super productive. They wake up early, they get their exercise in, they really are, going and ripping and roaring early in the morning. But then around 8 p.m., they're crashing and they are really tired. And so those people might have a harder time with kind of engaging in social life with people who are, hanging out after work or going to do different things, because their bodies are really tired and they're pushing their body past that kind of natural time where they want to shut down and get some rest. And so you can have these kind of misalignments with the external demands on the system, whether you're a morning type, really like that early time, or you're an evening type. And just one last point to that is that morning or evening type is typically determined by what we call your circadian rhythm. So kind of how the hormones in your body fluctuate due to the time of day gives your body cues about whether you want to be awake or whether you want to be sleeping. And so that chronotype is kind of dependent on kind of natural fluctuations and how that pairs up with your external environment.
And is that something that you can shift? Like, say you are a night owl and you want to become more of that morning person, or vice versa?
It's hard. Let's just say that. It is hard because it is really driven from internal rhythms, internal kind of hormones and it shifts and changes in your body. But because those hormones interact with the external environment, so because light can impact the release of, let's say, melatonin, which is a naturally occurring hormone, that's a time cue in your body, you can shift your time, your kind of natural rhythm based off of setting up your external environment. If you give yourself a lot of light, that will trigger some of your hormone release and allow you to kind of shift that morning type or chronotype a few, not a ton, but maybe a couple of minutes here or there.
Yeah, that's an interesting point too, because I think about some of the like podcasts I've heard in the past or interviews or things like that related to sleep and like productivity, for example. And some of these people who are like CEOs and they dive into their routines, and a lot of them are like the 5 a.m. type of people who get up really early and they've already done a workout and they've eaten by 6 a.m. and all this stuff. And I listen to it and I'm like, I don't think I could do that. That's not really how I function. And I know a lot of people that don't function that way, and they are way more productive at, say, 10 p.m. at night or something like that. And it's another one of those scenarios where it's like you get these sort of recommendations and it kind of brings in a lot of noise into what you should be doing for yourself, so to speak.
Yeah. And how frustrating is that? You're like, man, that sounds awesome, but I can't do that. It's so frustrating. But yeah, it's like, we can be great in ourselves, right? Like our bodies are already made for us. So we just have to try to maximize the things that work well for us. And the more we can tap into that, the more we understand our rhythms and our sleep, the easier we can become productive at our own times of day. We don't all have to be 5 a.m.ers.
Yeah, kind of tangentially related to that as well, and like this individualization of sleep. You also do a lot of work around how sleep can play a role in creating or exacerbating disparities in cognitive health for communities that are historically underserved by science and medicine. So again, this is fascinating to me because I don't really feel like this is a disparity that we, say, hear about a lot or discuss a lot or anything like that. So can you kind of talk a little bit more about some of the key learnings from that research as well?
So this is one of the kind of burgeoning areas in my research and in my lab. And it really centers from my experience as a person. And I'm a Black woman, and my family they would work many, many jobs, right? They would work 2 or 3 jobs just to kind of, like so many of us put food on our tables and feed our children. And I wondered what that meant for their sleep. And so as I started kind of navigating academia and becoming more educated about sleep, I'm like, well, there's some people in this world that have different access to sleep than others, right? Some of us actually have jobs when we're off at 5 and we get to go home and we feed our kids, or we hang out with our dogs, or we do what we have to do. And then we have the ability to get in bed by 11. But others have the skills or the jobs or the access they have to employment is aligned with a night shift, for example. Or others have caregiving responsibilities where they're taking care of loved ones that have, let's say, sleep disruption or kind of chronic illness that interrupts their ability to have access to sleep at night. And so these different types of scenarios kind of replayed in my head the more and more I learned about how important sleep is for our health and well-being. And I started to think about, well, what does that mean? What does it mean to have differential access to sleep? What is the impact of that on individuals' lives? And how can I try to understand that systematically? And then hopefully in the long run, make recommendations on how we can maximize sleep for people, and maybe even shift policy and culture around how we think about sleep. One of my kind of, pulpit moments is, sleep is as important to our health and our well-being as what we put in our bodies, what we eat, and how much water we drink, right? So it's a fundamental need. And if we don't get it, we will die. So we have to think about kind of centering sleep back into the mainstay of our health and well-being, and it not being the first thing that we kind of push off or move to the back burner when we want to be productive.
I mentioned at the beginning of it being an aspect of our well-being that affects literally all of us. We all have to sleep. It's part of being a human. And so I think that's why those key questions that you were posing there and what you're studying is really interesting, because, again, it's something that affects all of us, but we may kind of get in our own bubbles and not see what is happening to others. And so kind of as a follow-up, I guess, to your answer there, do you have any sort of early indications on some things that we could do at sort of a structural level or policy level, or even as an individual, just as a community, to help those who don't have that same access to sleep?
That is such a fantastic question. And I say that I usually say, like, I'm a scientist and I'm like really interested in working and collaborating with people who think about policy. What I can say from like an individual level, like in the communities that we live in, what I usually, try to advocate for is really getting rid of the shame. I think that people a lot of times associate sleeping or needing sleep or sleeping at times when other people don't with laziness or lack of ambition, or this weakness, right? There's so much in our society that says, work, 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 work. And so I think on the contrary, when you look at sleep, people typically say like, oh, come on, do you really need that? Sleep when you're dead. Those types of narratives that are kind of floating around our society. I would say let's drop those. Get rid of the shame around sleep. Really stop treating sleep as a luxury item, right? No, it's something that we need, that our bodies crave, that we have to maintain our well-being. And so really advocating for people in your family and your loved ones in your community to get the sleep that they need, and not pushing them beyond that or shaming them when they ask or like need sleep to, feel better.
Shame is one of those ideas that has come up a few times across the last 12 episodes. And it's, again, sort of interesting to hear that tie into this discussion as well. And we look at shame a couple of different ways, or we've talked about it a couple of different ways, and that like it's shame for yourself, like when you hit that point of like, oh, I'm supposed to be getting 8 hours, I didn't get 8 hours, and now I'm going to kind of beat myself up over this. And then it's shaming other people, like you said, like the, oh, you can sleep when you're dead kind of thing, and playing out those narratives to someone else. So I'm really glad you brought both of those points up as well, because it, again, sort of ties in to this sort of all-encompassing idea of resilience.
Yeah.
So let's kind of jump back into sort of the bigger picture of sleep and what's actually happening when we're sleeping. So why is sleep so important to our brains?
Oh man, we are still sleep science is such a new science. Why it's so exciting. It harkens back to what you said before, this idea that all of us do it, right? Everyone sleeps, but we also have these like intimate relationships with it. We have our own personal relationship, but it's so ubiquitous because we all do it. But the science of sleep is so new and young. We've only been really studying sleep for the last 80 years or so. And so what happens in our brain while we're sleeping is still this like ongoing quest. What we do know, why we think it's very important, is that while we're like walking and living our lives during our waking hours, when we're conscious and taking information, working our jobs, engaging with loved ones, having our social lives, our brains and our neurons are firing and encoding those experiences and taking in that information. And two things happen when that occurs. One is that you have these byproducts, these kind of this neural byproduct that gets released in our brain. And it's normal. It happens all the time. And these are kind of proteins that are released. And then the other thing is that those experiences are kind of sitting there in kind of a labile form, very kind of movable or transferable form. And when we sleep at night, two things happen. First, the brain helps you clear out that protein, that extra stuff that's hanging around, the byproducts of that neural activity. It helps you clear that activity out so that it doesn't build up in the brain and create problems as you age. One of the things that can lead to things like Alzheimer's disease is a buildup of that protein. So if we can wash that out while we're sleeping, it keeps our brains healthier for a longer period as we age. The second thing that happens while we're sleeping is that all those experiences that we're having when we're waking and walking around and seeing the world get consolidated when we go to bed at night. And so instead of us, living those experiences and completely forgetting about them, sleep helps us make those memories very stable. It allows us to wake up the next day and have a smile on our face and remember that birthday party we went to yesterday. It allows us to kind of hold that memory for years and years to come so that 5 years from now, you still remember that birthday party. And so I think those are the two main things that we really, really are interested about when it comes to sleep, is how it helps us keep our memories intact, and then how it keeps our brains healthy and allows our brains not to break down due to a buildup of proteins that just naturally happen throughout the day.
So what about kind of I know you mentioned emotions earlier as well. What about on that end? What is happening related to sleep and our emotions?
This is I think one of the most intuitive aspects of sleep. When you don't get enough sleep, you get a little bit more irritable, right? Like you get a little bit more testy, something that likely wouldn't, get under your skin if you had a good night of sleep. When you're not as well slept, you have less inhibition. Somebody says something and you're like, oh, come on, man, get out of my way. Or you might have a little bit more road rage if you're sleep deprived. You might beep your horn a little bit more if the car's not going fast enough. And that's generally because one of the things that we believe sleep does is it allows us to kind of take the experiences of our day, consolidate them like I talked about, but it also allows us to kind of take the emotions of our day and place them around those experiences in a way that allows us to remember them, but it takes away kind of any of that negative connotation, right? So if you had a bad experience or a fearful experience, it allows us to kind of take that memory without all of that visceral response to it. So one of the things that we think that sleep is really good for is helping us process the emotions that we experience throughout the day. And it sets us up to be able to really take in information throughout when we're awake again, without kind of that really quick lack of inhibition response to a negative experience or something that maybe isn't negative that we would interpret as negative because we weren't well slept.
Yeah, that consolidation and that ability to learn and to process, I think that's dipping into this next question, which is how can sleep make us more or less resilient?
Well, I think one thing about resiliency is our ability to adapt, right? So that's one thing that's really important when it comes to being resilient, is that you can be flexible. You can be adaptive. You can learn from your environment. You can take in information from it, and then you can utilize that information in effective ways. And that's really at learning how to adapt and having really good adaptations. And sleep is one of the fundamental ways that we do that, right? We take in information and experiences, and then we can use those experiences functionally after we've consolidated them and put them in context with the rest of our lives. And so I 100% agree that sleep makes us resilient through that mechanism of consolidation.
And so is that kind of like the idiom to like go sleep on it?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like that's one, like, if you're having a bad day, go sleep on it. You won't feel as bad in the morning. But another thing I like about go sleep on it, it's also like, if you can't figure out a problem or you can't figure out something, you're kind of running up against the wall. A lot of like these like famous writers throughout history, they would have these breakthroughs when they wake up in the middle of they'll wake up early in the morning and they have these breakthroughs to like help them solve, like write the story, or mathematicians that would sleep on problems and figure out the answers in the morning. And there's, history's kind of flooded with those types of stories. And so sleep doesn't only allow you to kind of process your emotion and, not be as mad in the morning, but it also allows you to really think about something and have breakthroughs that you wouldn't make if you were just awake.
I've mentioned this a few times on the podcast as well about like physical activity, like going on a walk or something like that, and how that can sort of spur that creative process or give you that breakthrough aha type of moment. And does the same thing kind of happen with sleep?
Sleep is even better than the walking in the aha moment. So it's a similar process so I think 100% going for a walk and taking a break from staring at whatever the problem is and just letting your brain kind of ruminate with it is a fantastic way to get some insight. And it allows your body to kind of do all the things that it does well, bring in information from the sensory systems, take in information from your environment, place it with the things that you're already thinking about. And all of a sudden you have new connections and new ideas and new thoughts that link that maybe wouldn't have linked previously. With sleep, what's real great about it is that you're actually not taking in any new information. You're just making new connections for things that already exist in the brain. And so you can make so many more connections during a sleep period than you can when you're having to still process information during wake. And so what's really nice about taking a walk during the day is like take a break, take a step away from it, focus on something else. And during sleep, you don't even have to tell yourself to take a break or take a walk away from it. Your brain's already doing that by itself.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you how many times I've woken up in the middle of the night and had a really good idea. Especially, and I think you're kind of talking about this is like in times of stress when I'm really trying to think through a problem or something like that. We've got something big coming up and that's kind of looming around, and I haven't quite finished it or it's not over yet. And I'll wake up in the middle of the night and I'll have this like really good idea, or I'll start almost like writing in the middle of the night,
Yeah.
and I've had to start leaving like a notepad or something by the bed just in case, because it's hard to, like, sometimes with your phone, you don't want to bring the light back up on you or anything like that too. So I'll keep like a scratch paper by the bed sometimes just in the event that I wake up with one of those moments. And sometimes I find myself too, if it's good enough, I'll kind of sit there and ruminate on it for a while and then I have a hard time falling back asleep. Is that kind of common as well for people?
It's okay. So there, you said so many great things in that. So I love the idea of a notepad by the bed. So fantastic idea. Second, so if you're going to bed for the first time at night and you have this kind of problem that you're thinking about, I would say, think about that problem as you're trying to fall asleep. Not if it's going to be, not if it's like super stressful. If you're dealing with a lot of high stress, try to take that problem, try to push that to the back of your head or move that away. But if it's something that's like, challenging or interesting and you're trying to figure out how to solve a problem, it's okay to kind of think about that right before you go to bed, because what you think about right before sleep is what your brain is going to also continue to process. So thinking about a problem that's kind of hard, that's challenging, not stressful, but challenging, is not a bad thing. And then when you wake up in the middle of the night and you have your notepad right there, you can write down that really cool thing that you might lose if you didn't have the notepad right by your bed. Now, when you try to go back asleep, that's a slightly different scenario. So your body has kind of already saturated some of its really, some of its drive for sleep. So when you wake up in the middle of the night, your body is already saturated its desire for one particular type of sleep, which we call slow wave sleep or deep sleep. And that slow wave or deep sleep, once your body gets it, it's like, oh man, okay, great. And sometimes it's harder to go back to sleep after that. So when you start ruminating or thinking about that thing again, that's actually just additionally ramping up your body after it's already satisfied that need for that deep sleep. And so it might be a little bit harder to fall asleep then. So in those moments when you wake up in the middle of the night, that's when you really want to clear your head or clear your brain and maybe even do some kind of mindfulness or meditation practices to kind of let thoughts come and go, because that will allow your body to potentially tap back into some of those sleep mechanisms that you'd already kind of saturated or satiated some of that deep sleep that you get once you fall asleep.
So when you get into one of those scenarios, when do you kind of draw the line? When is it like, I'm just laying here doing nothing, I should get up, versus like continuing to try to go back to sleep?
So this is my rule, and this is something that some clinicians say as well. I'm not a clinician, just a researcher, but this is the rule that I go by. Your bed is for sleep, and if you are a actively sexual person, and for sex. Those are the things that you should do in your bed. And so I usually say, if you're in your bed and you're not doing either of those two things, don't be in your bed. Don't eat in your bed. Don't read in your bed. Don't do anything else. Your bed is, you really want to give your body the behavioral cues that you only do these things there. And so if you're laying in bed for anywhere between 15 to 20 minutes and you have engaged sleep, 100% get up, go do something else. Read a book under very dim light. If you have a blue light filter, even better. Do something that's really maybe go lay on the couch and do some meditation or mindfulness to calm yourself back down, get your body back in a space where you can then go back to sleep. Do some maybe light yoga or some, mindfulness yoga, something like that to kind of relax your body again and then go back to your bed. But I would say, 15 minutes of not sleeping in bed is quite a long time for a traditionally healthy sleeper.
And continuing on that negative end of the spectrum of sleep, can we get too much sleep?
Yeah, there are some studies to suggest that, too much sleep can also lead to some of those kind of negative health outcomes. So there's been a lot of work to say, short sleep, for healthy adults, less than 6 hours over time. If you're sleeping up really short for, a lifespan, that could lead to things like increased mortality, cardiovascular disease, increased risk for type 2 diabetes, all these kind of negative health outcomes that we typically associate with not enough sleep. But on the other end, longer sleep has also been associated with increased risk for things like mortality. This is plus 9 hours of sleep. Some of the things that we have to continue to think about with that particular literature is that there are some comorbidities. A lot of times individuals who have kind of mental health concerns also sleep longer. And so the kind of chicken and egg conversation is there. Like, what came first? Was it the sleep symptoms or the mental health concerns? Was it a chronic illness that also led to longer sleep? And that was predictive. So I think there's that longer sleep literature has a lot of things also going on in there that might also be predictive of increased mortality. But there are links to that are notable. Yes.
And again, sort of building on that one, this question is for my colleague, Dr. Karen Briley McNeese, who's joined me on the show before as well. Huge fan of naps. And she knows I am as well. And we always joke about we want to get like nap pods in the office. But I know you've done some research on napping as well. So how do naps kind of factor in this? What kind of guidelines or advice do you have around napping?
No, I'm a big fan of naps. I will say, like, sometimes scientists do what we call me search, which is like they've researched the thing that they struggle with and they're not good at. I'm a great sleeper, so I am not a me searcher. I am a fantastic sleeper, and I love naps. I usually take, maybe 3 to 4 naps a week. I run a sleep lab, so it's not super hard. So what are some of my tips about napping? If you are generally an older adolescent or young adult, or even, I would say middle-aged, up into the age around of like 50 or even older than that, and you are generally healthy, you don't have a lot of other chronic illnesses, napping can be a really great way to kind of recharge your body, right? So you wake up in the morning, let's say you wake up and you get ready for your day around 8 a.m. And what time is a good time to take a nap for that person? Probably anywhere between like noon to 1:30. And if you take a nap around that time, you're going to be taking a nap at the time when your body's hormones, we talked earlier about kind of circadian rhythm changes, when your body's circadian rhythm is dipping. We call that the circadian dip. And that dip makes you feel a little bit sleepier. Some of us may know, like after lunch, we kind of have the yawns. It makes you feel a little bit sleepier. And taking a nap at that time would kind of like boost your alertness, boost your ability to focus, and really get you going. And I usually say take a nap either for 20 minutes or take a nap for 90 minutes. So you can take a short nap, 20-minute nap, that's like a nice power charger, or take a nap for 90 minutes. And a 90-minute nap will allow you to get through all of your sleep cycles and really kind of ensure that you don't wake up at a time when you'll feel really groggy. So 20 minutes, good to go, nice quick nap, you should feel nice and alert. 90-minute nap, great opportunity to really kind of give your brain a little mini boost, a mini charge. So that's kind of my ideas about napping. Try to nap in that kind of circadian dip time of the day, anywhere between 12 and 1:30. Either take a 20-minute or a 90-minute nap to ensure that you don't wake up when you're in that deep sleep, which can make you feel a little bit groggy.
And for the skeptics out there who say 20 minutes is not enough, or if I go to sleep, I'm staying asleep, what kind of advice do you have to hit that sort of 20-ish minute mark so that you don't end up in the bad part of the cycle and end up groggy and it kind of backfires on you?
Yeah, set an alarm. I'm a big fan of alarms for two reasons. Alarms are great if your body isn't very regulated with sleep. If you find yourself staying up a little bit later than you would like, or you find yourself having a hard time waking up when your alarm clock goes off in the morning, the more you set alarms in kind of what we call Zeitgebers or time triggers to your body, something goes off and it tells your body this is a time for this thing, the better your body will become entrained. The better your circadian rhythm will be aligned with your sleep schedule. So set an alarm. Say you know what? I have time on my lunch break from 12:30 to 1 to take a nap. I'm going to set an alarm at 12:30. That alarm is going to say, hey, okay, good. You can start trying to fall asleep now. Usually takes anyone between 5 to 8 minutes to actually start sleeping. And then that 20 minutes will be up at 1. Your alarm should go off, wake you back up. I will say 20 minutes might not feel enough, but you should really give it a shot. You think it doesn't sound very long, but a 20-minute nap is extremely refreshing. And if 20 minutes is just no way, somebody told me Lauren, there's no way a 20-minute nap's going to work for me. That's when I say really try that 90-minute nap. If you have the time, you have the time in your day, a 90-minute nap will really make you feel great. But again, you want to hit that 90 minutes. Set your alarm prior. Set your alarm for your wake up time. Give yourself about 5 minutes to fall asleep within that window, and you should be good.
I think something that's worked really well for me as a relatively avid napper, I would say, is to make myself just slightly uncomfortable as well. So I don't go get in the bed under the covers kind of thing. I'll get into a position that's comfortable enough to fall asleep in, but not one that I'm necessarily going to stay asleep in for an extended period of time. And that usually works really well for me. I'm not really a stomach sleeper. So maybe I'll take a nap on my stomach so that I know that my body's probably going to want to move after, 15, 20 minutes anyways. And that's something that's really worked for me. Again, I have no idea if there's any science behind any of that, but maybe give that a try too.
That's so interesting. That's a very cool behavioral cue. That I feel your sleep style. Another thing I would say is that if you're really having a hard time waking up from your nap, that might be a good sign that you're generally experiencing sleepiness in your life. So if you are not getting enough sleep at night, your naps will probably be a lot harder to wake up from.
And so that's a good point too. Can we catch up on sleep? Is that a thing, or is that a bit of a misnomer?
We typically understand our sleepiness in a term called sleep debt. And what that means is, we think about it as kind of if you don't get the hours of sleep that you need, that it kind of just goes against you. It starts to kind of count against you. And the idea is, well, man, you would have to make up a lot of that debt, pay back a lot of that debt with sleep hours to make yourself feel better. The hard part is that usually if you're not getting enough sleep at night, it is a lot of times it's chronic, right? So if you're having a hard time, if your hours in your day don't allow you to get enough sleep at night, it's hard to then chip away at that sleep debt. But can you take a prophylactic nap? Let's say, hey, I'm usually a really good sleeper. I go to bed at night around 11. I wake up around 7. I feel great usually throughout the day. But I know upcoming, I have this really big thing that I won't be able to sleep a lot for. So, you have some sort of life event. I won't be able to sleep a lot that night. I'm going to take a nap today to prepare me for my sleep loss tomorrow. That is something that people do very often. They're students do it all the time. Man, I have this test coming up. I'm going to take a nap so that I can kind of prepare for a little bit of sleep loss later. Additionally, if you know that you're going to have a long night and you're not going to have a lot of sleep tonight, you can also put some time in your day the next day to say, let me take a nap a 90-minute nap around noon tomorrow and then still get to sleep that night at my normal time. So you're trying to kind of protect yourself from some of the negative effects of sleep. But the only way to get rid of your sleep debt is to sleep. There's nothing else you can do out there that's going to chip away at that debt. There's no tea you can drink. There's no magic cocktail you can take that's going to chip away at that debt, with the exception of getting some sleep.
The couple tips that you gave in there are really interesting. I never actually thought about putting some sleep in the bank, knowing that I may not sleep the next night or two, and trying to add a little extra on there in preparation. And I think that ties really well into the idea of resilience again. We're obviously talking about resilience in your sleep itself, and that's a strategy that you can use. But I think that idea again is pretty global in the world of resilience too. So I'm glad you brought those up, because that's something new that I've learned, something that I probably could stand to use and implement myself personally. So I always like to learn new things on the podcast as well. So I do like to say that I like to learn alongside the listeners. So that was something that I learned. So I kind of let everybody know when something kind of clicks in my brain too. So kind of talking about those like tools and strategies and things like that you can use, kind of boil down what your general advice is then for improving your sleep or just getting a good night's sleep consistently.
I say try to make it simple. One, we talked about this a little bit earlier. Don't treat sleep like a luxury. Treat it as important as it is. I say plan your sleep like you plan the rest of your day. You put your meetings on your calendar, or you know what time you have to be at work in the morning. You know what time you have to pick up the kids from school. Plan your sleep. Put it on your calendar. Say, I'm going to try to go to bed at 11. I'm going to try to wake up at 7. I'm going to put it on my calendar and treat it with the respect that it deserves. Don't treat it like a luxury. Treat it like something that you're going to do intentionally. And then second, I usually say, if you have time, let's say you're going to be setting up for a vacation or something. My biggest advice, and the thing I say to people all the time, is if you have the time to really to really know what your sleep need is, how much sleep you should be scheduling in your day, try and give yourself a couple of days to go to sleep when you feel tired and wake up when you feel rested, and do it for a couple of days. And then just say, about how much sleep did I get for those 4 days that I did this? Use that as what you plan in your schedule. So if you go to bed regularly at, you said I get sleepy around, 12:15, then I wake up each morning around 7:15 and I feel rested. Well, then use that as what you schedule and try to make that fit into your everyday life as best you can.
So what are some tools or resources, such as like apps or devices or even other podcasts or websites or books or anything like that you would recommend to listeners if they wanted to dive a little deeper around sleep or get some additional, say, help with sleep or support?
Yeah, there's a lot of things out there, and so I'm not one to endorse them. But there's one app that I do use in my class. I teach a sleep neuroscience class here at UK, and it's a free app. You can get it on iPhone, Android, anything, and it's called the Sleep Cycle app. And I like that app because, one, it's free, so everyone can have access to it if you have, a mobile device, and it's not. One thing that I should say about most of those kind of mobile devices is that they're not telling you what your sleep actually looks like. Sleep is a phenomenon of the brain, right? So you would have to really look at someone's brain to know what their sleep looks like. But what it does do a really good job of is telling you kind of your sleep behavior. It tells you roughly, when did you go to bed? When are you waking up? How much are you moving at night? What does your sleep look like? I really highly, highly, highly suggest doing that if you're having trouble regulating your sleep time, going to bed when you really need to go to bed. I think it also has features where it allows you to kind of identify the bedtime that you want, and it'll remind you and send you kind of alerts to say, okay, you said you were going to go to bed now, it might be a good time to do it. Another kind of low budget thing is that there's the blue light filters on your phone. If you're not using them, please use them. Have them turn on once the sun goes down. Our bodies for generations upon generations have evolved to respond to light cues. So when our bodies think that if any little tiny bit of light in our environment is the sun, and it's telling us to stay awake and stay awake as long as you possibly can when the sun's out, and use that sun to be productive. And so if you're getting that sun, or you're getting that, what I call sun, artificial sun, through your phone, through your TV screen, through your light bulbs in your house, try to limit that as much as you can in your evening hours. So blue light filters on your phone, blue light filters on your electronic devices more broadly, and even blue light filter bulbs in your house are really great ways to try and limit your access to artificial light, which will allow your body to start processing those sleep cues that it has naturally, and allow you to kind of be sleepy when you need to be sleepy to be productive. And I would say kind of the last tip I would have, and this is kind of because caffeine is something that's out there and everyone drinks it so much. Everyone loves their Starbucks. I would say try to limit your caffeine as much as you can intake, especially after noon. If you're drinking caffeine after noon, it's going to make it really, really, really difficult for you to get sleep at night.
Yeah, another app that's available to UK employees is called Sleep Rate, and I'll actually cover that in the outro as well. So make sure you listen through the end to hear about that and some other things that are available within HR to help support sleep as well. So one fun question for you. What are one or two songs you relate to or use for your own resilience that I could add to the Wildly Resilient playlist that I've shared on Spotify?
Oh, I love that. So this is, I think this song came out years ago, but one of my favorite artists is India Arie, and she has an amazing song called I Am Light. And it is kind of like an affirmation song. And it just tells you that you are all of the good things, and your circumstances and your life and all of these things don't define you. You define you. And that's one of my favorite songs. And it makes me feel extremely resilient.
Awesome. We'll look for that on the playlist. It'll be linked in the show notes as well. All right. Final question. If you hope listeners take one thing away from this episode, what would that be?
Yeah, I probably said this multiple times throughout, but sleep is not a luxury. Sleep is a basic biological need. And so treat it with the same respect and care and intention that you treat every other aspect of your health. Really try to not push it off, and center it as you center all the other health needs that you have. So yeah, sleep is not a luxury would be my takeaway.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all your knowledge on sleep.
Thank you so much. It was a great conversation. I enjoyed it.
That's it for this episode of Becoming Wildly Resilient. If you're looking for additional sleep support and want to dive deeper on the topic, HR Health and Wellness has a few other opportunities for you. First, as I mentioned toward the end of the conversation, is the Sleep Rate app. We're offering it to current UK employees for free, a value of $9.99 per month. Sleep Rate provides a sleep assessment and tracking, then uses that information to recommend changes you can make to your sleep habits. Visit our Better Sleep section on the HR website to learn more. The link's in the show notes. Next, the Optimizing Your Sleep presentation series that we hosted in July 2021 is now available on the HR Health and Wellness YouTube channel. You can learn more about improving your sleep through creating habits, physical activity, nutrition, and mental health. Each presentation is under a half hour long, so be sure to check that playlist out if you're interested. The final sleep-related opportunity I want to let you know about is a consult with one of our health coaches. Consults are available to UK employees, retirees, and their spouses at no cost. In your 60-minute session, you'll receive tools, strategies, and encouragement to help you reach your goal. To learn more and sign up, you can visit the Personal Resilience section of the HR Work Life and Wellbeing page, or click the link available in the show notes. And as always, you can find links in the show notes to anything we mentioned throughout the episode, as well as the HR calendar, which features upcoming work life and well-being programming like a co-room mindfulness retreat, intuitive eating workshop series, and more. Until next time, take care of yourself and others, and sleep well. Thanks for listening to Becoming Wildly Resilient, a podcast series from University of Kentucky Human Resources, Health and Wellness. The UK HR Health and Wellness team, consisting of certified health coaches, fitness experts, registered dietitians, and wellness specialists, offer a wide range of online and in-person programming to University of Kentucky employees, retirees, and their spouses. If you enjoyed this episode, you can listen and subscribe to future episodes wherever you find your podcasts. Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram by searching @UKY Wellness. There, you'll find links to episode show notes and more. You can also email healthandwellness@uky.edu with any questions or suggestions for future episode topics. To learn more about well-being benefits offered by University of Kentucky Human Resources, visit www.uky.edu/hr/wellbeing. Live well.